morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, April the 8th, and welcome to 7 Investing Live. This is our live stream event we host every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern to put a spotlight on several of the stock market's most investable and intriguing opportunities. My name is Simon Harris. I'm the founder of 7 Investing. I'm joined by Heather Horton, our executive producer of our live stream show. Heather, are you doing okay? Are you having a good Wednesday morning so far?
I sure am. It's a beautiful day here in Virginia.
Fantastic. It's beautiful here in Texas as well. I hope that anybody who's watching live, it's a wonderful morning for you as well. Apologies that I've taken the last week off. I'm in the middle of moving right now, closing on a new home tomorrow. And so I've got a temporary situation where I'm kind of moving around locations, and that's kind of kept me out of pocket for a little while. But I did want to make sure we hit the live stream event, keep up to date, and keep the feed relevant and fresh here. And so today, we've been talking recently about the breakthrough technologies from the MIT Technology Review. We talked about several of kind of the 10 trends and the innovations that they think are most interesting this year in 2026, but we also reviewed a few of them from previous years. And we also kind of were looking forward of what we thought were most investable trends and the most interesting things going forward. And so I wanted to kind of take the next level from that here this morning. This is not a 10 breakthrough technologies from the MIT Tech Review, but I did come up with 3 trends that I think that investors need to be aware of right now and describe them a little bit, and then also some of the companies that we should be watching within them. Some of them are a little bit tangential. We've talked about several of these before, but there's still 3 that, as I'm looking at what's going on out there in the world and what's going on out there in innovation and technology, here's 3 trends that I think are really interesting, and I'd like to discuss them each a little bit more in detail. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this is allowing you to now view the PowerPoint presentation. We're going to start with trend number 1. The first one is weight loss drugs are now larger than life. Be prepared for the puns, ladies and gentlemen, they are coming. But we've seen in recent years that GLP-1s, the glucagon-like peptide drugs that are available from several of the largest drug makers in the world, have now gotten FDA approval for an oral pill format. These are no longer just the injections that you would need to take. They're now available in a pill. You can take them orally. And that's, we expect, going to expand the total addressable market significantly. In addition to that, we've seen that the GLP-1 drugs for years just had no insurance reimbursement for them. They just weren't covered. If it was weight loss, this was something you had to pay completely out of pocket. And if you were taking something like Zepbound from Eli Lilly or something like Wegovy from Novo Nordisk, you were probably paying more than $1,000 out of pocket because it wasn't getting any coverage. And that has changed here within the last year. We've now seen broad insurance reimbursement coverage from Blue Cross Blue Shield, from United Healthcare, from Aetna, from CVS Caremark, and then also from the Medicare programs. Medicare had the Balance program that is now in select areas reimbursing at least partially and sometimes full coverage, not only the GLP-1s in the injectable format, but also the new wave of weight loss pills that are orally administered. So this is reducing the cost, like I said, from more than $1,000 a month for the injections, or depending on the dosage you were taking, between $150 to $300 a month for the pill, to now in many cases less than $50 for patients to be paying out of pocket. So not only do you have people that didn't want to take the shot getting the pill, which is going to expand the market, but you've got the cost decreasing in some cases by 90% or more, which is making this more affordable. You can just see how this is going to unlock a new market out there. And in addition to both of those, just the supply chain is simpler. An oral pill doesn't require the cold chain storage or transportation that you would need for the liquid injection. This is much more easily to scale up the supply chain and then also to offer these pills internationally. We've already seen a lot of interest in Brazil and in India and other international markets as well. In 2024, 2 years ago, the number of eligible patients within the United States that were using GLP-1s for obesity care was only 3%. And within one single year, we saw the eligible patients double to 6%. The market share of the GLP-1s doubled in a single year. And it's going to be interesting to see how that lands in 2026 now that we've got options for the oral pill as well. And there are already a lot of estimates in the investing community of how big is this market going to get. Keeping in mind the diabetes care, which was Novo Nordisk bread and butter, was around a $75 to $80 billion market internationally, globally. It's expected that the total addressable market for weight loss pills will be at least double, if not triple that, within the next decade. In fact, I've already seen some research suggesting the addressable market for weight loss drugs globally could reach $190 billion by 2035. And so a couple companies that I think that we really should be paying attention to, the two branded global pharmaceutical drug makers, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. These are the ones that have gone out and done the research and development, gotten these through clinical trials, spent a lot of money to get the IP and the patents on these drugs. Now they're competing head to head. And you're going to see a lot of claims. I know which of these are producing the lowest weight reduction for the patients that are taking those, and then also the side effects and the safety profile as well. So keep an eye on kind of the two-horse race between Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. There are other smaller companies like Viking Therapeutics, who is also pushing a GLP-1 and GIP agonist, dual agonist, through the trials right now. They're in phase 3 of trials. But then Hims and Hers is also on the distribution side of this, creating relationships with patients that want these medications. They're going to have relationships not just with the patients, but also with the drug makers themselves as we kind of ramp up the distribution of these. Heather, I know we've talked about this before. This is my biggest first trend, weight loss drugs becoming larger than life. I think it's something that we have to pay attention to if we're investing in this trend.
Definitely. I have a question. Do you know if the efficacy of the pills is similar to the shots?
From what I have seen, I do not believe it is as high, because you're not going directly into the bloodstream like you would with an injection.
But it's not a shot. So, so do they use the pills for type 2 diabetes or only for weight loss?
I believe that they have, oh goodness, that's a good question. How are they being used orally? I think there's some trials going on with it. I have to double check on if you're using it for diabetes or not.
It's just interesting because, well, just the cold chain transport is so much more difficult, especially parts of the US and outside the US. It'd be really interesting if they could use the pills for the really effective type 2 diabetes treatment outside the US. That would be another huge market as well. So that'd be
they
really
are
interesting.
Peptides. Yep. Semaglutide is the same active ingredient for both, for diabetes care and for the weight loss. Like you mentioned, the transport is so much easier. And, we've just seen now this recently, this year, it was Wegovy was approved in the oral pill format for weight loss in January. And then we just this last month saw Zepbound get its own approval. It's not going to be called Zepbound, but the oral pill format from Lilly too. So,
I mean, the number of users has got to skyrocket because the price is it's so much more attainable, and not having to deal with needles is, people like that.
And it's in so many of these companies, Novo especially right now, because of some of the challenges it's faced in the past couple of years, whether it was supply chain or capacity or IP protections or whatever it might be, is really kind of an inexpensive stock. We've talked about that one a lot, that you've got this huge market that's growing into, you're going to take advantage of. It's also still kind of those, you can get the growth and the value at the same time with this one.
Do you have one of these stocks you like the most, or are you kind of looking at it as a basket?
Right now, the market favors Eli Lilly. It is a higher valuation because generally accepted that that Zepbound, and then also perhaps their new oral pill, was a little bit better in efficacy. The primary endpoint was total weight loss that a patient would experience based on a similar dosage over a similar time frame. But again, this tends to be something that, the bar is set here and Novo is getting all the attention. And then all of a sudden you've got Eli Lilly that releases their new, and then Novo's already got some new compound versions, some cocktails that they're making that are going to be even more effective coming out in a couple of years future. The patents matter, but they're also going to be iteratively improved on this. I think it's going to still just be a two-horse race. And depending on the coverages and, which one you prefer or which one, is working the best for the safety for you, it's going to be ultimately patients that decide that.
We had talked about this a little bit before, but I think Eli Lilly has shown that they're a little more tuned into the American insurance market, and getting Zepbound approved for sleep apnea as well as weight loss with the FDA, so that insurance was covering it for a lot more patients, because a lot of insurance didn't cover weight loss, but they would cover it for that. And so even though it was the same mechanism that it was doing for patients, I think that was a really interesting business move by Eli Lilly. And with the pills, it's a little less important because they are more affordable for more Americans out of pocket. But I do think that's worth watching, just how plugged in they are to American healthcare, because it's an interesting system.
It sure is. And the name of the game, if you are a large drug maker, is go find the miracle drug compounds and get them as broadly indicated as you can. Sleep apnea, cardiovascular health, weight loss, diabetes, whatever it is. These are the same types of compounds. Those GLP-1 drugs can be used for a lot of different things. Let's keep moving. Let's go on to the second big trend that I think we should be paying attention to, which is supporting technologies for AI data centers. We know there's a lot of money being spent on the data centers that are used for AI training, AI inference. And that's why NVIDIA has made so much money over the last decade. More than a decade, but it's especially these last couple of years. But now we've got, because of the pace of what's going on here, we've talked a lot about not only the processing and these supercomputers that are running large language models at scale that are requiring custom chips, ASICs made by Broadcom or NVIDIA's GPUs or whatever other processor you might be wanting to use for it, but also the networking, which we kind of call as the east-west traffic within the data center, just sending the information between these models to the places that it needs to go before it even goes out to the rest of the internet itself for anything that it needs to be used for. The supporting functions, the cooling functions, the HVAC systems, the power components. You know, we've talked about how big a data center can be and how many of these supporting functions it's going to be needed. XAI, you know, the Colossus infrastructure that they have, that they're building this data center in Tennessee, already has got 200,000 of NVIDIA's GPUs using 500 megawatts of power. Elon thinks that's going to scale to be 4 times as large, that 2 gigawatts. Keeping in mind, 500 megawatts is about the city consumption of power that the city of San Diego is using right now. You're going to be 4 times larger than that for a single supercomputer in Tennessee. Meta platforms, you know, Mark Zuckerberg is wanting to talk about Hyperion. It's going to be 10 times larger than Colossus is right now. He says 5 gigawatts. I mean, these are absolutely massive, but you're going to try to wring out every single operational efficiency you can get out of this, right? We've got that kind of power usage. Every single percentage point of operating efficiency matters. You know, how well are you using your power costs? And so we're starting to see these supporting technologies that have been around for a long time. They just haven't been to this magnitude of scale. And now that we're getting so aggressive in deploying these data centers, all of a sudden these really matter a lot. And these companies that were very small before, Heather, you know, small cap companies, maybe even micro cap companies, this is their time in the sun, and they're going to get out as much as they possibly can to support NVIDIA as a preferred partner for its agreements that it's having for these large data center buildouts. And so a couple of things we've talked about, co-packaged optics. These are the laser transceivers and receivers that are converting between electrical signals that are typically used within a data center. If you're doing a process, you're sending information from an electrical signal, you might convert that into a light signal that can move much, much faster and with not as much resistance or losses as you would have through copper wires. You know, you want to send it through fiber optics. And so on that one, we've talked about a company called Lumentum, you know, just a couple of shows ago. This was one that had a niche technology really, really applicable right now. On-demand energy, you've got solid oxide fuel cells that are converting gas to electricity with no combustion, right? So this is not natural gas. You're still using the same food stock, but you're not giving off any of the emissions that are related to this. And it's on-demand power, right? This is not something you have to go out there and grab it from the grid. You don't have to build a giant nuclear power plant to do something like this. This is something that is modular, can be sized to exactly how large you need it to be for a small data center, all the way up to a 5 gigawatt data center. And again, it's using fuel cell technology originally used for the Mars missions with NASA. Really cool to see this applied now for data centers. And then even quantum computers. NVIDIA himself has been, at the GTC conferences, it's been Jensen Huang, who's been mentioning, we want quantum to take some of these workloads that are just going to not be efficient to be done on GPUs. Yeah, GPUs are going to be the workhorses. They're going to be doing most of the inference, most of the training, most of the things that we're used to be right now. But there's still some really, really hard workloads. They want to plug in a quantum computer to do the really tough stuff. And so NVIDIA has created the Q-Link interface that can it's kind of the traffic cop that delegates, okay, GPU, you're going to be handling this workload. Quantum computer, you're going to be handling this workload, and make sure that you guys are coordinating to run all of this computing in parallel. Just like a GPU is doing with the CPU today, we would be taking the next evolution of that, which is really neat. And so a couple of companies we talked about before, Broadcom, kind of the modern architect of the modern AI data center, just doing all sorts of neat things. Lumentum there for the co-packaged optics. Bloom Energy is the provider of those solid oxide fuel cells. Inflection is a newly public company that's doing quantum computers at room temperature. And then IonQ is doing ion trapping, another opportunity for quantum computers to be catching on right here. But some neat stuff here, Heather. I mean, like, it's really cool to see. It's not just NVIDIA, it's not just Google, and it's not just Microsoft making all the money from this. You can go out there and invest in some of these smaller cap companies, because sometimes it's the picks and the shovels that can provide your multi-bagger returns out there.
Yeah, I mean, they're always been my favorite investments. You know, it's funny. I bought NVIDIA as a picks and shovels to self-driving cars.
Yes.
Because I was like, okay, I mean, they're all going to need a chip in them. And NVIDIA was the one who was like really focusing on it. That's why I bought NVIDIA forever ago. But now it's like, okay, what am I going to buy to support NVIDIA now? And it's, you're always going down the list as something gets huge. The on-demand energy, is that Bloom Energy?
Yes, Bloom Energy, yep.
FCS. That is super cool. And I think we should do a deep dive on that because I want to know more about those. Just a reminder to everybody, you can go to the youtube.com/@7investing live and you can find more on just about all of these stocks. We have individual shows and deep dives. I'll also put them in the comments. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat wherever you're watching, and we will answer them at the end of the show. Of all of these, I think I'm most excited about quantum computing, which is funny because I'm also actively investing in energy for data centers. I think that's the one I'm like actively looking into and investing in. But the one I'm most excited about researching right now is definitely quantum computing going forward. Which of these trends for data centers are you most locked into right now? Or once again, is it just the full basket that you're interested in?
No, I've got an answer for you. I've got one that to me stands out of the ones that are listed as the companies to watch. That to me is the clear biggest beneficiary from this trend, at least. Heather, I'll put you on the spot. Do you want to guess which one I'm going to answer here? You've got Broadcom, Lumentum, Bloom Energy, Inflection, or IonQ. It immediately popped off the page to me when you asked that question, but I'll ask you which one you think is the most interesting.
Oh man, your favorite? Ooh, is it Lumentum? No.
That would be a really good guess because we just talked about it. But honestly, I'm going to go with Bloom Energy. I mean, just the power. Right. The power supply is so lagging the demand right now, and you can't just go pull it from the grid without it kind of messing everything up for the rest of us. You've got to have this on-demand power that's available. And we talked about small, modular reactors, and kind of the stuff that like NuScale was providing. But even that is like years out in the future, right? They're still going through kind of the regulatory process and getting to scale up. Bloom is ready today. They say, look, we got fuel cells. Tell us where you want them. These are modular. We can make them as big as you want and put as many of these together. I just think that that's going to be a no-brainer trend.
Yeah, let's do a deep dive on Bloom.
I'm so glad you asked, Heather, because I have an upcoming slide to answer exactly that question. Okay. We didn't discuss that before, but I think I read your mind on that one. We'll jump to that in a little bit, but first let's talk about the third trend, which is SpaceX. SpaceX is preparing for its IPO. Anyone who's followed the news here lately has realized what a big deal this is going to be. First of all, SpaceX did acquire XAI, the other X and the other part of the the company name that Elon owns. We know how he loves X and everything that he touches. But they acquired XAI back in February, $250 billion. That's a big acquisition, right? Because he wanted to marry SpaceX and blasting things off in outer space with the data centers that he was, of course, developing custom chips for that was running Grok and other things related to Twitter, now X. But at the time, when he made that acquisition in February, it implied that SpaceX was worth more than $1 trillion, actually $1.25 trillion valuation based on how they structured that acquisition. And now SpaceX has filed for an IPO, could happen as soon as June, just a couple months out from where we are today, which they're looking to raise $75 billion of capital at a $2 trillion valuation. This would by far be the largest IPO we've ever seen in the entire world. There are only so many companies that are even worth $75 billion for 100% of the company, much less to raise $75 billion and not give away the company because it's still worth $2 trillion in the grander scheme of things. This trumps Saudi Aramco and any of the energy companies that were kind of the previous largest IPOs we've seen globally. Why does SpaceX want to do this? Well, this is another crazy idea that Elon's come up with. We talked about it with Robert Quinn on the show here a couple of weeks ago, that he wants to build orbital data centers. He wants to launch data centers out into outer space, have them solar powered, have them easier to cool because you're out in outer space, have them completely unexposed to earthquakes or weather or anything like that we've gotten used to with terrestrial data centers. He wants to beam them up into outer space and do this. Sounds crazy. This is 100% what Elon wants to do. And then in addition to that, SpaceX isn't just doing orbital data centers. Their primary business today is the Starlink satellite internet. They've got an entire constellation out there that's beaming broadband internet through satellites to all corners of the world today. We actually we got several on the ground updates in Australia about how much better this was in certain locations that just didn't have this option before. Starlink has been catching on very well. Of course, they continue to develop the massive rocket. The Starship launch vehicles is still in development for those that have followed along with that. I mean, there's some big things that SpaceX can do if you can all of a sudden start launching massive payloads into space for whatever Elon has an interest in doing. There's some complexity, some interesting peculiarities, perhaps we should call it, with what this IPO might look like. It's expected to have no lockup period. For those who are used to traditional IPOs, you can't sell your shares if you're an insider within 180 days, just so that everybody can't go out and unload all their shares on day one now that it's a public company. This is expected to have zero lockup period. So SpaceX's insiders could, on day one, if they wanted to, unload their shares. So that could be interesting for investors to keep an eye on. And then, of course, a dual class structure, which would keep Elon firmly in control of the business, something that it would be very, very difficult to wrestle the voting majority control out of his hands, which I don't think that surprises anyone that Elon would be pushing for that to be one of the terms. And then SpaceX still private, could be public here very soon, as soon as this summer. Some other space launch companies like Rocket Lab, we've talked about them quite a bit here at 7 Investing. MDA Space, building other satellites that are used for constellations out there. I just think this is going to be a trend that kind of rises the tide for a lot of these space-related companies, whether you're using it for imaging, whether you're doing it for video, whether you're building the satellites themselves, whether you're doing the launch. I mean, this is just, when you talk about that kind of magnitude of numbers, it's not just all going to be SpaceX. There's going to be a lot of others that are going to win from this trend, and I want to keep an eye on it.
We're going back to space.
Here we go.
I mean, Artemis is up there right now. This is just such a wild trend. $2 trillion valuation. Do they have the value to back that up?
We've got to take a look at that again, April. Excuse me, Heather. Why did I say April? Maybe because I'm thinking it's April now.
I was born in April, so
yeah, apologies with my brain being what it is these days. Starlink is a big deal. Like, that's the cash cow that they did. Elon always said, if you remember a couple years ago, he wanted to actually spin off Starlink to its own public company. He wanted to remove it from SpaceX so that would just be the IPO, because that was where the value was for the business. He thought he could get a better multiple if he would remove the longer term future projects from the business today that you see. But if he's going to get a true $2 trillion valuation and Starlink can support it, you package everything together, right? You've got XAI in there now too. You've got the data centers. Elon has kind of Lego pieced together, a lot of these businesses that do have some, synergies to make a bigger whole that is worth now a larger amount. And so I think he's done well to do this the way that he has strategically and get the larger valuation, even though it could have made sense even to just spin off Starlink by itself a couple of years ago. We'll see. We got to see the prospectus, to answer the question of what's the valuation look like, and is this a good deal for us? I've got my doubts on the valuation and then also some of the terms that they've got in place there, but it's certainly worth keeping an eye on.
I'll link the show we did about data centers in space along with some other things. And it was really interesting, the fact that data centers in space, although it sounds kind of crazy, there are reasons to do it. You can get really good solar energy, so the power concerns, there's no real cooling worries because it's really cold in space. There are good reasons to do it, and it's economically not as wild as it sounds. Maintenance is obviously a much bigger question and concern, but SpaceX is not the only company thinking about this, considering this. And so, yeah, I'll link above and below in the comment. in the description, that episode as well.
And sometimes these innovations that sound crazy when you hear about them the first time, they actually happen. Right now we're terrified of a data center coming crashing down to Earth, or we're terrified about debris running into it and exploding or whatever. But like, if you can address all those things, sometimes it's the craziest ideas when you look at but what are you getting out of this? What are we getting out of putting a data center in space? What is that going to enable? Are we going to suddenly do fabs where we're making chips in space in zero gravity? Can we do drug development with zero gravity out in outer space? Are we going to have hotels in outer space? I mean, all these things that we've talked about, if the money supports them and there are the scientific benefits that technologically make sense to do it that way, generally innovation finds a way to make those happen if it can be safely done.
I mean, data centers are hard on the environment, and maybe the danger of one crashing down to Earth is actually a lot less dangerous than what one on planet side is doing. So
Yes.
maybe it is a better option.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need someone to put up the wild idea, and very smart people seem to think it's very doable. So it'll be really interesting to see this IPO and the paperwork coming out of it.
So Heather, we've talked about some really neat stuff. We're coming up at the end of the show here, but this is a look at the watch list that we've had at 7 Investing. You and I run the 7 Investing live stream. Like we've been mentioning, we've had some great guests talk about some exciting things. Several of these companies have been discussed on this show, but we also have something for 7 Investing members where we take a look at new companies every single month. We add 2 more companies to the watch list. And several of those businesses that we just discussed, Bloom Energy, Lumentum, Inflection, and then others, Broadcom, Zeta Global, Micron, whatever it might be. These are companies that we haven't at the time of publication officially recommended yet, but it does open the door for them to be recommended on our scorecard. And again, the scorecard is the official recommendation. That's the one that every month I'm saying, go out and this is my very favorite idea. I've got my 5 best buys every single month, but we've also got the watch list, which is the pipeline of new things that are going on there. And so this is kind of a little bit of a tease, if you will, of what we've talked about there in the recent months for the watch list. Here's a full list of everything we've talked about on the watch list, back all the way since August of 2024. And it's the full gamut, right? From Vail Resorts to Novo Nordisk to Sphere Entertainment, and they're in Vegas, to Ferrari, to IonQ, to more recently Inflection, to Micron Technology, and Bloom Energy and Lumentum. There's always neat stuff going on out there. I have been a student of disruptive innovation my entire professional career, so I love this stuff, and you can kind of see how passionate I am about it. I'm trying to bridge the MIT Tech Review tech-heavy side of it with more of the Bloomberg, or the Barron's investing side of it. Where is the cool innovation going on, and how do you make money off of it? And that's what a lot of our watch list has been dedicated to. So I think that's it that I've got. Again, a reminder, if you do want to see all of those, you mentioned earlier, Heather, you want to see the deep dive into Bloom Energy. But if you want to look at any of those companies on the watch list there, we're offering 7 days free of 7 Investing. Go check all this out for 7 days, no upfront costs, no strings attached, no obligations. If you go to 7investing.com/subscribe with the link that Heather just put up right there, you get full access to all the recommendations, all the watch list, all the best buys, everything that we have to offer. And if you love it, and this is something that you enjoy and you're making money off of, and you enjoy our coverage, it's only $200 a year. I think that's priced a lot lower than a lot of other investment services out there. And again, we've got a really good track record of doing this. And then even previously, before 7 Investing, good solid track record that growth style investing works. Because if you catch early trends early enough and you find the right companies, you put even a couple of those into a diversified portfolio, and you're going to be doing all right for your investing returns. I'll stop sharing at that point. Heather, we're at kind of the end of the show here, but any other thoughts about any of these trends or the stuff that we talked about here?
Well, I need to go read that about Bloom Energy. I can't believe I missed that. I'm so excited to dive in on that. I love this style of investing. It's always been my preferred. It's just, to me, the most interesting form to find what's new in tech, and then how do we invest in the future that we want to see. And it keeps it really interesting. It's not the stagnant, boring type of, of just like, I bought a bank stock, which if that's your thing, that's great. But to me, this has always been the really fun, it feels like you're investing in the future. And I've always loved this type of investing, and I'll pull that up. What? Oh, no. I mean, that's where you can find us, but I'll pop that back up. Yeah, I need to go look at Bloom. I think that's everything. I'm really excited about that stock, though. I want to go learn about it some more. So maybe we'll do a deep dive on here sometime soon for it.
We will. Let's talk about Bloom in an upcoming show. I will have a new background and a new home here, hopefully very soon, and you'll get to see that here on the live stream event. But again, kind of the process for this is it starts with the neat technology. You've got PhDs and postdocs talking about what they're excited about. They grab some funding in the private markets. You start seeing the momentum build for them. There's an IPO event that brings them public, and then all of a sudden it's all about scaling the top line to the point that you can drop cash flows into the pockets of the investors that support those businesses. So that's kind of the typical progression of a lot of these companies. We're seeing some really neat publicly traded companies here. We'll talk about Bloom Energy. I'm going to be talking about the SpaceX upcoming IPO for the watch list here in April. In addition to the companies that we just showed before, we're going to take a closer look at the SpaceX IPO. Still private, but I'm going to get a hold of some financials and some interesting information that we're going to talk about that for the watch list here coming up. But thanks again. Thanks for tuning into this show. Hope you enjoyed the breakthrough technologies before this. There's 3 more trends to be keeping an eye on. We appreciate you, and we'll be seeing you again next week for our live stream show. In the meantime, have a great week. Have a great weekend. See you next week.